Have you ever noticed how some government places are widely known, officially acknowledged, and yet still strangely hard to fully understand? It's not about grand secrets or dramatic revelations, but rather the quiet, persistent ambiguity that lingers around their very existence and operation. The official statements often present a framework, a context, but the intricate details of how these places function, how decisions about them are made, and how information about them is managed over decades can remain surprisingly opaque. Today, we're going to slowly unpack one of the most publicly acknowledged facilities in the United States, and yet one that remains procedurally difficult to follow, even after its formal confirmation. We're talking about the institutionally known, yet informationally elusive, location often referred to as Area 51. Our focus won't be on speculation, but rather on the long, winding path of its institutional recognition, the shifting sands of its official communication, and the enduring questions surrounding the process of its classification and eventual partial acknowledgement. For decades, the name Area 51 existed largely in the public imagination, fueled by an almost complete absence of official governmental communication. From the mid-1950s, reports began to surface from remote parts of Nevada, describing unusual aerial activity and a highly restricted military installation near a dry lakebed called Groom Lake. These early public accounts, often anecdotal, painted a picture of a place that was demonstrably there for those who ventured close enough, yet officially nowhere. The U.S. government, through various departments and agencies, maintained a stance that ranged from outright denial of the site's existence to a policy of no comment regarding any specific location in that expansive desert region. This initial period established a deep chasm between public observation and official record, a procedural silence that would shape much of the subsequent institutional narrative. The initial public awareness of Area 51 wasn't driven by any governmental disclosure, but rather by the sheer visual presence of a highly guarded, seemingly secret facility in the Nevada desert. People observed flights, saw physical structures, and interacted with personnel associated with a clandestine operation. Yet when they looked for official maps or governmental acknowledgments, they found none. This created an unusual informational landscape where the physical reality of a significant government installation was widely recognized by those in its vicinity, or by persistent observers, but entirely absent from official documentation. It was a place existing outside the formal cartography of the nation it served, a bureaucratic nonentity that nevertheless consumed resources, employed personnel, and conducted operations. This was the first significant procedural hurdle for anyone attempting to understand its institutional lineage. The formal government interaction with the facility began to subtly shift not through direct acknowledgement, but often through legal necessities. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, former workers at the site filed lawsuits alleging environmental damages from waste disposal practices. These legal proceedings, brought against the Department of the Air Force and the Environmental Protection Agency, forced a peculiar kind of institutional response. While the government did not overtly name Area 51 or fully describe its activities, it did invoke national security exemptions under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA, for an operating location near Groom Lake, Nevada. This was a pivotal moment, a procedural workaround where the government, through its legal defense, indirectly confirmed the existence of a facility in that specific vicinity, without ever uttering the public's chosen moniker or detailing its purpose. This subtle acknowledgement, extracted through the legal process, provided the first crack in the wall of complete denial, but it was far from transparent. This partial acknowledgement, veiled in legal jargon and national security claims, highlighted the intricate dance between classification, public interest, and institutional necessity. The government wasn't proactively declassifying. It was reacting to a legal challenge, using existing frameworks to protect information while still acknowledging a presence. The environmental lawsuits provided a rare glimpse into the procedural dilemma faced by institutions managing highly classified projects. How to operate within a legal framework that assumes transparency, while simultaneously maintaining secrecy deemed vital for national security. The facility's existence, though still unnamed as Area 51 by officials, entered a new phase of being acknowledged obliquely, through legal footnotes and court filings, rather than through direct public statements or map updates. For years, the classification status of the facility, whatever its official internal designation, remained steadfastly opaque to the public. Military classification processes generally follow a structured path, where information deemed sensitive for national security is assigned a classification level, confidential, secret, top secret, and then reviewed periodically for potential declassification. The purpose of these reviews is to balance the need to protect sensitive information with the public's right to historical understanding and governmental transparency. However, the trajectory of Area 51, or the operating location near Groom Lake, appeared to deviate from this standard procedural model in its public-facing dimension. The very existence of the site seemed to be classified, not just the operations within it. This presented a unique challenge in tracking its institutional history. The struggle for more complete information continued primarily through Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) requests. Historians, journalists, and interested citizens filed numerous requests with various agencies, seeking documents related to the site. The responses, when they came, were often heavily redacted or consisted of "no records found" replies, which, while standard for classified materials, only further fueled the public's questions. It was a slow, piecemeal process, each small release adding a fragment of detail without ever providing a comprehensive overview. This fragmented release of information, often delayed by years or even decades, created a patchwork understanding of the facility's past, rather than a clear, chronological narrative. The procedural friction was constant, public demand for information met by institutional gatekeeping. It was not until 2013 that a more direct, yet still limited official acknowledgment occurred. In response to a FOIA request filed by a historian in 2005, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, declassified a portion of a 1992 internal report titled The Central Intelligence Agency and Overhead Reconnaissance. The Humanist II and Oxcart programs, 1954-1974. This document, finally released in an unredacted form, explicitly mentioned Area 51 by name. It detailed the site's role as a testing facility for the Humanist II spy plane during the Cold War. This was a significant procedural milestone, moving from indirect legal acknowledgments to a direct, named reference within a declassified historical document. Yet even this definitive statement came decades after the Humanist II program's operational peak, and nearly 60 years after the site's initial establishment. This 2013 declassification, while celebrated by many as the definitive acknowledgment of Area 51, was itself a curious procedural event. It wasn't a comprehensive opening of all files related to the site. Instead, it was the specific declassification of a section of a historical review that happened to contain the name and some details of its early purpose. The document provided context for the Humanist II program's development, explaining why a remote, secure testing facility was necessary and how it acquired the internal designation, Area 51. But it did not unravel the entirety of the site's subsequent history, nor did it explain the decades of prior governmental denial or the rationale behind the precise timing of this particular declassification. The acknowledgment, while clear, felt circumscribed, offering specific historical context without opening the floodgates of broader operational transparency. Even after this 2013 release, the process of understanding Area 51 remained a complex institutional puzzle. While its existence and primary historical function for the Humanist II program were now officially recorded, the subsequent decades of activity, the evolving classification boundaries, and the full extent of projects undertaken there continue to reside largely outside the public domain. The terminology, too, evolved. From an operating location near Groom Lake in legal filings to Area 51 in a declassified historical document, reflecting a slow but discernible shift in official language. However, this linguistic shift didn't necessarily bring with it a commensurate increase in procedural transparency regarding ongoing activities or a complete historical record. The case of Area 51, therefore, continues to illustrate the nuanced and often protracted nature of governmental information release. It highlights how acknowledgments can be partial, driven by specific legal or historical review processes rather than a comprehensive, proactive declassification strategy. The institutional communication surrounding the site has been a journey through indirect references, carefully worded legal defenses, heavily redacted documents, and finally, a historical confirmation many decades later. What remains procedurally unclear is not merely the content of past operations, but the precise framework governing its ongoing classification, the criteria for future declassification, and the institutional decisions that shaped its unique informational history. The gap between a confirmed existence and a truly transparent operational history endures, leaving a persistent procedural ambiguity around one of the government's most famously acknowledged, yet still largely uniluminal